It's an absolute blowout at the hands of the All Blacks. They are off to semi-final number one. He is the only team ever at a World Cup to lose a pool game and go on and lift the biggest prize of them all. South Africa are World Cup winners in 2019. They have thumped their way to the Red Alice Cup. Sia Khaleesi, the captain, in game 50.
Yeah, you're very welcome back to our sports review of the year. We're going to focus on rugby now for the next while. I'm delighted to welcome into studio now our man in rugby, that is Paul Nolan, to look back at the 2019 season. Paul, I suppose we might start with the Rugby World Cup. Obviously, Japan, well-organised tournament. Ireland, I suppose, going out at the quarter-final stage, yet again failing to get past and well battered, I suppose you could say, by New Zealand, unfortunately, on the day. But the campaign overall, how would you sum it up?
Yeah, I suppose it was the campaign that we went into with the greatest ever expectations of a semi-final finish, at least. None of us, I think, got carried away with the tag of being the world's number one going to Japan. But having said that, of course, it equally became the biggest disappointment in a long time. And you know, people are very critical quickly about Joe Schmidt and about players' lack of effort and all of that. I can tell you it's none of that. Schmidt doesn't become a bad manager overnight, and certainly the players didn't go to Japan to not get to at least a semi-final. It's just one of those things that unfortunately for the Irish setup, it didn't click. And I suppose it's hard for us to know outside the camp what the thinking was going to Japan. Looking on the outside, we kind of felt, well, yeah, maybe Joe has a master plan here where we were a little off colour in the Six Nations. Yeah, the defeat to England worried everybody, and then we bounced back with a win away, home and away to Wales, and we thought maybe this is real clever and we're where we need to be at the right time. As we all remember, after a shaky start against Scotland, wow, what an exhibition! Ireland just creased them, and we felt, yeah, we're totally on track. And fair play to Schmidt, we've gelled at the right time. And then, of course, Japan became the banana skin. And they went on to prove that it wasn't a one-off. They certainly played a wonderful brand of rugby. It was almost like sevens. The ball was moving constantly, and they literally, I think, mesmerised Ireland, because Ireland were the first to really be inflicted with this method of play. And then, as you say, unfortunately, when it came to having to go out and do the business, having kind of slugged through Russia, we just weren't really able to take on the All Blacks. But look, what a fantastic tournament it was. What a great finish. Again, nobody could predict it. We thought after the way England demolished the All Blacks, it was going to be theirs for the taking, and up popped South Africa, who just scrambled through Wales and managed to pull it off. So I think, Gavin, you and I spoke before the World Cup saying any one of Six Nations can win this, and even though we know the result now, it's still true looking back, with for the tiniest of tweaks, with the exception of Ireland, who just genuinely were off colour for the tournament. I'd say any of them could have won it.
Yeah, which is testament to, you know, how close the nations are. And I suppose the final, some will say, Paul, England had New Zealand bet that, you know, all the advantages were with them, but South Africa were in the long grass, and the display they gave that day, I know, you know, it was the last 5 minutes when they really kind of, I suppose, strutted their stuff as such, but, you know, the manner of their victory as well, and it clearly meant a lot to them.
Absolutely, and it was an amazing achievement, and, you know, fantastic, I suppose, bit of pride for us in that their coach, of course, had served his time, we can say, in Munster, doing a good job there.
Erasmus, of course.
Yes,
yeah.
And Felix Jones then that he took on with him. It's been a great experience for him. So yeah, look, overall South Africa were well deserving of their win in the end, but certainly I suppose of the top six they probably were the dark horse to an extent, but they managed the game plan and did an exceptionally good job. I suppose one of the things that's curious for me, this experiment of taking the World Cup to non-top tier nations, I think that has done wonders for rugby in Japan. And I just hope now that within the international system they get an opportunity to play more competitively more often, because there's no doubt they do bring something to the party, and it would be great to see them more closely involved in the future. And not just a nation where if you want to finish out your days it's relatively lucrative.
And they really bought into it, didn't they? You know, it was such a party atmosphere, Paul, over there, and I was talking to a few guys who were actually over there. The whole experience was second to none. Absolutely,
they were saying they just could not have done more for everybody. The stadia were amazing. The officials were so willing to see people, to facilitate visitors. I think they were wonderful ambassadors, not just for the game of rugby, but for their nation. And I'm sure they'll get a lot of follow-up tourism as a result of this, because nobody came back with any negatives whatsoever.
Absolutely, yeah. Chalk it down indeed. South Africa, the Rugby World Cup champions 2019. We'll just stay on Ireland, I suppose, in the Six Nations at the minute. It was sort of an indifferent campaign at the start of the year, and I know it's a long way back now, and I suppose at this stage you're looking forward to the 1st of February isn't too far around the corner, Paul.
Absolutely. As you know, we've got this next coming year, we have 3 home games and 2 away against England and indeed France at the very end. So we start with the team we just mentioned there, the trouncing we gave Scotland in the World Cup. Well, we have them in the Aviva on the 1st of February, and that'll be interesting, I suppose. We have a new manager in Farrell, and yet he's not new because he was at Schmidt's shoulder for the last 6-7 years, and he brings a lot to the party, and I've no doubt that he will put his own stamp on it. We've seen already just back there at a couple of weeks ago the selection of his first kind of boot camp. I suppose that's a bit of an official get to know you campaign. It's also about looking at who's out there coming through now that the next milestone has passed in the World Cup, and it'll be very interesting to see the likes of Caelan Doris, Kelleher, the new hooker in Leinster, and so on. There's quite a number of guys there that he wants to have a look at, and perhaps there'll be people who seem to get the nod from Joe that probably are worried. On the other hand, there were people on the periphery that are hopeful that maybe Farrells will look at them in a different light. So all to play for. It's, I suppose, a rebuilding. That's what it should be in every sense of the word in 2020. Some people, more senior people, have a view to their opportunity on the lines in 2021, and for the rest it's really about, and for Farrell I'd say it's about bedding in, believe it or not, with a plan to build towards 2023 for the next World Cup.
Absolutely, and they won't be easy shoes to fill. Joe Schmidt, just to touch on him briefly, Paul, brilliant ambassador, I suppose, for Irish rugby over the last few seasons, and I know it was disappointing the exit he had in the World Cup, but obviously got through an amount of work in his term.
Oh yeah, I mean, no one can question, as I said, you don't become a bad manager overnight. He was, of course, exceptionally disappointed with the way things finished out, but there's no doubt we will probably never see his likes again, as they say. And if Farrell can be close to Joe Schmidt, fair play, that in itself will be a huge achievement. But look, he's relishing the challenge. We have to move on. I think it's good for rugby to get fresh blood in that sense and see what he brings to the party. So without being complacent, what better chance could you have but starting at home against Scotland based on recent form? So it's all to play for, and I suppose we just have to look forward to what's ahead of us in 2021.
Absolutely, yeah. Look forward in earnest. I suppose we might touch on the provincial scene for the next while, Paul, maybe starting with Munster, I suppose, who are obviously going into a busy period now, and currently, of course, in the Champions Cup, just lost out to Saracens there recently. Their season in 2019, could you say, was kind of indifferent?
Yeah, well, I suppose 2018-2019 by Munster's traditional standard was somewhat indifferent, and I think they've had a good hard look at themselves, because what we've seen is a Munster team that was always amazing and grunt in the will to win, tenaciousness, all those words come to mind, and that was good enough for them to do very, very well for a long period, particularly given the talent that was peppered through the team. Again, probably a moment in time that we'll never see, when you have half a dozen truly world-class players from the locality playing at the same time. So I suppose by those standards, and by the fact that there's so much money in the game now, particularly in France and all that, the hill has certainly got a lot steeper. And I think the brand of rugby that Munster were playing is now, looking back on it, it's apparent that was beginning to suffer. Every good coach knew how Munster played, and if they had half enough talent, they knew how to unlock it.
Were they too predictable at times?
Yes,
feel, kind of,
it was our usual format that we've been playing for years. So it's great to see that, despite, and nobody likes to see the loss of the likes of Flannery and so on, that there's a bit of fresh thinking there, and with Groundtree in, and particularly with our Australian back, Steve Arkham, that it's bringing new dimension to it. We've seen it against Saracens and so on. The backs, when the ball is provided to them, are certainly taking, it looks like, a much more offensive role, and that's what we need, because obviously, unlike hurling, just like hurling where goals are more important to win matches, it's tries you got to have in rugby, and I think that's where Munster are on the road back. As I think we said in our last chat here, I would just be concerned about, with no disrespect to current incumbents, whether we've enough class at 10, and also I think at 9, when Murray's on form, it's fantastic, but that tends to be in modern rugby the key to unlocking most teams now, if you have a good 9 and 10, and therefore I think a bit of effort will have to be made into shoring that up. But look, at the end of the day, they're playing good brand of rugby at the the moment. They're not world beaters yet. Bit of work to be done, but certainly we've seen, I think, a much better game plan from them in the last 3 months.
We go on about it the whole time, but you really do feel it when you're on the pitch, and we do the half lap before going into the dressing room, and the crowd really gets behind you and stuff, and it just creates for a great atmosphere and for the start of the game.
Staying with Munster for the next while, obviously chatting to Jack O'Donoghue there before the Christmas period, and I suppose he's had someone saying indifferent season on and off the field. He's been through a lot of injuries, etc. But trying to nail down the permanent place on the Munster team, is that his main aim, do you feel, going forward?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the passport to future success. And as you say, Jack has been very unfortunate with his injury at the end of the previous season. It's a long, hard fight back. Competition is fierce, and testament to the guy. I think he managed his injury exceptionally well. He got himself very fit again and has built up his game time with Munster to the extent that only a couple of weeks ago he captained the side, albeit in a losing Pro 14 game against Edinburgh, but came away with man of the match, which is a very unusual accolade when you're on the losing side. We saw him, as you say, against the top team in the world almost at this stage in Saracens, and he acquitted himself extremely well, particularly in game 2 where he was left on the park for the full 80 minutes, and certainly he was very prominent both in his line-out play, his defence and attacking style. So it was fantastic, and I suppose I felt at that stage that he'd done more than enough to be in Farrell's initial look into squad or get to know your squad, but unfortunately that hasn't been the case. But I don't think it'll stop Jack from proceeding to try harder, and I'm looking forward to good things from him in 2020, just as long as he can stay injury free, because there's no doubt his progress from the player he was 2-3 years ago is exactly where it should be, in my opinion. He's filled out, he's strong, he's now fairly experienced in terms of the Munster camp, and I'm very confident for him if he just gets the break he needs, to be honest. Not having said that, of course, we know that in all positions for Ireland, particularly in the back row, it's extremely, the standard is extremely high, so he knows the challenge, and it appears he's up for it.
Absolutely, yeah. Great to see him, great to see Waterford on the map, I suppose, at that level as well. Just sticking with the Champions Cup, of course, the 2018-19 final, Saracens, of course, defeating Leinster, a cracking decider. I know Leinster had a great campaign going into it, but obviously Saracens are, some would say the best in Europe at the minute, Paul.
Absolutely. We can say several things about it. One, obviously an extremely talented squad. There's no question of that. Secondly, when you see how well England, which I suppose the backbone of the team came from into the World Cup, with the exception of the final game, was incredible. And then against that, I suppose we hear about the fact that it's an illegal in the rule sense of the financial packing of that side. But against that, one wonders if maybe it was an indication of something just not being right with the Irish players in what we subsequently saw in the World Cup. There's no doubt Leinster head and shoulders above every other side in Ireland right now, and certainly as of going into this Christmas back to probably better than they were this time last season. There's no doubt that they're an amazingly talented side, and good luck to them. But again, look at them this season. We have new players like Caelan Doris coming through, Keller in the hooker position. They seem to have that conveyor belt currently, and it can only be good for Irish rugby and exceptionally good for Leinster, particularly with the results they've been having so far in the Champions. And, you talk about maybe the money and the investment going into it. I think a lot of it has to come down to the phenomenon that really is Leo Cullen, for a guy who, played a high standard of rugby all his life and suddenly became coach of a pretty serious outfit, and then has driven them on to be almost irrecognisable, almost from what Joe Schmidt did before him, is just amazing. And I think he's a guy that doesn't get half enough credit for what he's been doing. Nor does he want it. That's his style. But an amazing job, and certainly Leinster are a world-class side without any doubt at this stage.
Yeah, very unassuming character as well. And just, I suppose, touching as well briefly, Paul, on Ulster and Connacht as well, who are working hard behind the scenes, and both have had solid campaigns and, really passionate about the game as well. They've had great results throughout the season as well, and both putting a lot into it.
They have, and there's no Irish team going to be built on a one province system, and we need the mix, and we need the talent, and we need the variety of coaching skills that get them there. And it's wonderful to see Ulster, as you say, we go into the new year unbeaten in their leg of the championship, and we see Connacht always the underdog, but never giving up and pulling off some incredible victories during the first half of the season, and again supplying people like Bundy, Aki, and then I think Cooney is a very bright prospect retrospect, it's a pity that for him that Conor Murray is in such good form at the moment. I think he'd be in there with a great shout, and I think we're very lucky to have him. So Rory best position there. McBride is doing a good job in replacing him, and so it's again, they're in more difficult circumstances. They don't have quite the same pick, the same school set up as Leinster, but in their own way, I think they're all doing they're boxing well above their weight, which is very productive for Irish rugby again.
Absolutely, indeed. Yep, exciting times indeed. And I suppose finally we can't end without touching on the local side here as well. And there's a lot of work going on at grassroots level here in Waterford, particularly the three clubs in the Munster Junior League. Waterpark obviously in the top tier, Dungarvan flying high in Division 2. Great promotion of course last season, and Waterford City in Division 3 as well, Paul. So a lot of good work going on locally. A
lot of good work, and it's great to see that support has improved. If you're in the vicinity of any of those venues and there's a match on, you'd have to be impressed with the turnout, be it a good or a bad day weather-wise. And yeah, as you said, look, I suppose that the pick of the three has to be Dungarvan in a sense of just promoted, and as you say, at the top of their division right now, which is fantastic for them. In terms of Waterpark, I guess it's still a struggle. They've played a couple of games that there was just no way they deserved or had a hope of winning, and that's fair enough. One or two games out of the 5 or 6 so far, unfortunately, were games that looks like they should have won, and I can think back to Tipperary, and particularly going up to play in Tiptown. It was a match that unfortunately just they let go, but having said that, they bounced back and they've had a 5-pointer, they've had a 4-pointer, and another couple of wins early in the new year should cement their place in Division 1 where they need to be. Again, I think the biggest issue that the club have at the moment is getting just enough players into the mix to strengthen up the squad, because like at every other level, injuries unfortunately are part and parcel of the game. And Waterford City, in fairness, providing great value for money as always, wonderful spirit, and a great bunch of lads there too.
Absolutely, yeah, no shortage of drama as they say, and Dungarvan flying high as well, so keep up the good work, three clubs I suppose.
I think again, looking at the strength and depth of Irish rugby, it's still in an exceptionally good place, and I think what it's all about now is just taking the very good, the positives, hoping to get a very acceptable season in 2020 would be my hope, not looking to beat the world, because there isn't anything really up for that this particular second half of the season, and then to start building seriously towards 2023, which will come around in jig time again. And what that needs is, I think, is going to be the development of young players, people possibly who haven't even heard of yet, and at the same time then we have to get the best out of players that, let's put it this way, are in their mature years at the moment, and think that how many of that squad that played in Japan just will not be around in 2023, and that's, I suppose, the hard work that has to go on behind the scenes to provide us with the entertainment we've become used to, Gavin.
Absolutely indeed, yeah. Nice note to end on. A lot to look forward to going into 2020. Paul Nolan, our rugby correspondent, appreciate you dropping in. Thanks for everything throughout the season as always, and enjoy the remainder of the festivities, and Happy New Year as well to yourself.
Happy New Year to you and all the listeners. Thank you, Gavin.